Welcome to Going Deep. We are in the 2024 post-draft edition. And speaking of post-draft editions, Angelo Fantasy over here, Mr. Brandon Angelo. You can find his post-draft information over at Angelo Analysis. I'm a subscriber and cannot wait to dig in. So you definitely want to check that out. And he's got great video analysis there, and I'll let him tell you a little bit more about what you're going to get post-draft here.
Yeah, no. First, we got post draft RSP coming out too. Can't discount it. But yeah, no. I mean, for me, I do kind of like a two-part rookie guide. And the first one is just the Ascension grades, which is film and analytics combined into one grading system, and then I do the Ascension draft guide, which is where I would take these guys, where I would trade out, and then just kind of walking through tiers, what to do in different situations, etc. But it's a lot of fun. It's a fun time of year because I have my own rookie drafts that I'm doing right now. Yeah, it's awesome to be able to interact with the community in a sense, and just talk shop a little bit about what to do in different spots and what people are targeting and what projections are for this year for some of these rookies. And I'm sure you and I will dive into that a little bit too. But yeah, it's been a fun week just kind of looking at how the landscape has changed so much after the NFL draft. Some good landing spots and then some head scratchers and some not so good. So it's been interesting.
For sure. We're certainly going to do that. We're going to talk about some day three prospects that we're willing to gamble on, maybe how our process changes with draft capital, undrafted free agents who intrigue us, and then maybe players that we think are overrated and underrated. And those are some things also you'll find in the RSP post draft. I've just finished the setting up the post draft rankings. I gave an early cheat sheet to those on Sunday night for those who are subscribers already, and sent out some updates. I'll send out another, well, not updates, but I'll send out the preview to folks who bought after I announced it. I'm doing that every 24 hours, but I may just quit soon enough because I'm pretty much done with the rankings, 220 players, and I looked at 12 drafts with ADPs, and I'm basically getting the sweet spots values set for each player, so you can see where they are, where I have them ranked versus where the ADP is, so you can kind of take advantage of their draft capital. And I already wrote up everything in terms of who's overrated, underrated. I did that all this weekend, so now it's just finishing up the depth chart of 220 players and all their depth charts.
Big depth chart.
I look at all the little. I basically create a depth chart, or I create it where I have the rankings in linear format, color coded in tiers. But you have I show you the depth chart for that player. So we look at someone like Justin Strong, who's a South Illinois running back, who I actually liked after getting a chance to watch him. I show you the contract status of the players on the depth chart that he's entering, so that you can kind of get a chance to see where I think he'll be right now, and where you can kind of look at that in a little bit of analysis there. So you can get that at mountwaldman.com along with, and when it's available for download, I'll email it and let you know.
Love it.
Yep.
Love it.
So let's get started. How does your process change when draft capital is now known?
I think the biggest thing is these teams spend so much money and have so many resources to look at these players in depths that we can't get to, right? In terms of interviews and interactions with, their teammates and collegiately, and things that obviously we don't have access to, right? Behind closed doors. So we get to kind of see who goes earlier than we anticipated based on our own individual rankings and process, and or who goes later. And we can kind of say, why did they go later? And I think the famous one in this, one of the more famous ones in this class, is A.D. Mitchell, right? He was, I think his line was set at 17.5, right? So he's over under 17.5, draft selection. And he went he went in day 2. So, you kind of look at the process of why did he go later why did he go later than, or late first round, mid first round? So looking back on the process and players like that in terms of super talented guys, but then guys like Jalen Polk, who went before him, who aren't as talented physically, and looking from the lens of, why the Patriots pick a guy that's less talented. But I think the process for a lot of teams is, line of best fit. How do they currently work into the offensive system? Is this a player we're going to have to groom and take slow? Because a guy like A.D. Mitchell, for example, has a great nucleus to grow with in Reggie Wayne and Jim Bob Cooter. He has good coaches to grow with, but he's not like a set it and forget it day one starter. And that's kind of the thing where we kind of have to sit back and say, why did these guys go later? And what information do NFL teams have that we don't have access to, that may have kind of made it so these guys go a bit later than usual?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that I think draft capital certainly has a factor. For me, I kind of look at it by position. At quarterback, I don't factor it in very much because, to be honest, I don't think they figured out if the draft hit rate is 33%. I can go ahead. I'm going to write off draft capital to an extent. Sure. I mean, if he's a player that, I'll put it this way: if he's a player that nobody really thought that most people weren't talking about was strong, and you like the player at quarterback, like say if Skylar Thompson was a good example. I like Skylar Thompson more than pretty much everybody. If he got drafted in the third round in that class, that would have been huge for me. At the same time, knowing that the fact that he got drafted at all was like a positive for me, just because
sure.
I knew that he probably wasn't going to be. He may not even get drafted. Running back is probably where I think has the most draft capital for me.
I 100% agree. I think in terms of like potential share of an offense,
yeah,
right? Because like guys who are potential centerpieces of the offense and their running backs drafted like in the top, 25 essentially, right?
Yeah.
Or even the first round, you could say. Those guys have significant shares of the offense from like year one.
Yeah. The expectation's going to be strong, and if it
100%.
not, there's something very apparent. Like I look at like Marshawn Lloyd, and he moved up on my board because of how early he was drafted, but he didn't move up unbelievably so because he still has Josh Jacobs, who has an out, by the way, in his contract next year. So, yep. And then he has A.J. Dillon. Now, both of those guys are capable running backs, but I look at it as that if Marshawn Lloyd doesn't beat out A.J. Dillon, based on what we've seen from A.J. Dillon at this point, then we know that Marshawn Lloyd's flaws have popped up big enough
100%.
to be an issue. Now, if Marshawn Lloyd beats A.J. Dillon and gets the committee role as the change of pace, and Joshua Jacobs has seen the door next year, then so you kind of have to factor it that way. But I would say like wide receiver for me, I've had enough scouts tell me that wide receiver has the greatest range of variation from team to team because of need.
For sure.
So I would say I still factor it like more if the player has rumors of things that weren't good, or you hear bad things or issues that they're not going to be as early as you expect.
Right.
And then they're earlier, like Jermaine Burton's a perfect example. To me,
sure.
Jermaine Burton, I was thinking the way people were talking, he was going to be like 4th, 5th, 6th round type of player. The fact that he went in the 3rd is very positive to me because that tells me that maybe they're worried a little bit about some things, that he's not a 1st or 2nd round guy. But at the same time, he really didn't have the production of a 1st or 2nd round guy.
Right.
And I know certain things that factor into draft capital that don't matter to me. So that's another point, is that the bullet points of draft capital that I think are just BS. Like to an extent is like school. I mean, there's some of these things matter, but school, production, height, weight, like the minimum stuff that GMs say, we're invested in that because it's safe and I can explain it away, because that's how I got into this industry, Ren. And it was like I'm listening to Gil Brandt talk about Brian Westbrook and just how he'd be a top 5 overall pick if he were just 2 inches taller and 10 pounds heavier. And I was like, this kid's sick. He's so good. Like, how do you not say? And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, oh, this is corporate America all over again. This is all this is. So, like, as long as you can, certain things are like more like they're explainable and tangible to like the people who have to face the media. So I get it. But then there's things like Jermaine Burton where you're just like, okay, I know what he can do on the field. He didn't have the greatest quarterback, this past year in terms of compared to what he's had or what the system's been.
For sure.
So, okay, I feel better about that. And then there's some guys that I look at and go, draft capital is good, but you look at those skills and then you look at who they've drafted in the past. And then that's an issue for me too. Like New England would be an example of a team where I go, they haven't hit on wide receivers. Now this is a new regime.
Yeah, I know.
But it's brutal. It's the same people except for Bill Belichick. There's nothing different.
Yeah, and that's like
100%.
And that's the scary part too. I think it's always as well when looking at it from like an infrastructure standpoint, like the leash these guys have. I think that's an indication of draft capital too. Is like, let's say a guy like Javon Baker, for example, right?
Yeah,
I love them. A wide receiver 4 doesn't move down that far because he landed actually in a good spot for an outside receiver because the Patriots don't really have one of those on their roster right now, at least a healthy one.
Yeah,
but he's a 4th round pick. If you're outside the top 100 picks, your leash is so short. In the NFL. If you get hurt, make mistakes, you better believe that in the next class, they'll draft the guy in the 2nd or 3rd round to supplant the 4th round draft pick.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're just fighting for, you're fighting for a roster spot for the rest of your career. And that's a big deal in terms of the leash these guys get, right? Guys drafted later have less of a window to prove it.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing, and less of the time to make mistakes, especially with like injury and things of that nature. Like 1st round picks, if you get hurt, then you might get another go at earning a role.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you're like a 4th, 5th round pick, like day 3 guys, that's when it really drops off. If you're a day 2 guy, you might still have a chance to earn a role if that current regime is still there. That's another big one, right? Yeah. When the coaching staff changes, they want their guys.
Yep.
Right. It's not as simple as, oh, okay, this guy was the starting X last year. He's still pretty good. No. New scheme, new coaches. They want their dudes. They want to handpick those guys and live or die by what they choose. And it's honestly sometimes more of an ego thing than a talent thing.
Yep.
Right. And so.
But if you're a first round guy and you 100%. Perform poorly, Quentin Johnston, Jim Harbaugh says, well, let's draft a couple of guys. Let's put them in here. We got Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, put the heat on.
Yep. Yeah, we got Cornelius Johnson.
Yeah, and because you don't have to go to bat for the first rounder. He's not a first rounder anymore. He's a year 2 player.
Yep.
That's what he is. He's not a first rounder.
No. That's
doesn't matter to you.
He's a year 2 player who dropped a lot of footballs.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it's a win-win for coaching staff. Because you think of it, either you help resurrect this year 2 player's career that wasn't very good year 1.
Yep.
Or you're like, push him out the door. We don't need him as much. Kind of look at the same thing with Treylon Burks in Tennessee. Yeah. Right? Probably going to be the same thing. Rumblings of Tyler Boyd coming in for visits. That tells me that staff does not view Treylon Burks as a starting receiver in 3 receiver sets.
Yeah.
And they don't care. This is year 3 for the kid. They didn't draft him.
That's right.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. And that's and that's kind of just how the cookie crumbles in terms of these guys and their infrastructures drafting these players. And like one thing I started looking more into this year and grading it was infrastructure, right? When we talk about top down, like where does the ecosystem go in terms of the success of this player? Like Caleb Williams, perfect example, first overall pick, Chicago Bears. He has all of the tools with him right now to be a top 10 quarterback. They invested in receivers. Okay? They have an upgraded offensive line. They have a GM that's going to give him whatever he needs surrounding him to have success. Inverse of the first overall pick last year with the Panthers, where, okay, go win me some games with 33-year-old Adam Thielen.
Yep.
Like, that's the difference in a Jonathan Mingo who doesn't know how to play receiver yet.
And an owner who's sending plays on a napkin.
Oh, I know. That's an incredible story, by the way. And then, you have Miles Sanders, who you paid a boatload of money to. I think the AV on Sanders is the 5th highest paid running back. Miles Sanders.
Yeah.
Who's not very good. And he hasn't been. You think you go from a system like Philadelphia, then go to Carolina, and you're going to be better. No. But that's the thing is, like, you have an ownership and infrastructure there that doesn't recognize what it takes to help the player have success. And so guys like that are just like, I feel bad for Jonathan Brooks. Even though, Dave Canales is at the helm now, it's going to take a few years for that infrastructure to get better. And it might never, because the ownership is terrible. And so that's the difficult part, and the delicate balance is, you look at infrastructures on kind of the up and up. New England, you mentioned, it's the same but different. It could be really good, but it could also be an absolute train wreck. The one thing I'll say is, Gerard Mayo made a point of taking guys that can help Drake May develop. And that was a really positive. I saw an interview where he was talking about Polk and Baker in particular. And the one thing that stuck out to me was he talked to Drake May after they chose him, and he was talking about, receivers that Drake May liked. And it wasn't Devontae Walker. Because they would have drafted Devontae Walker in day 3 instead of Javon Baker. But they chose Baker. Because Drake May wanted an X that can go win the ball. Right? And so that's the stuff that is different when you look at from the standpoint of the organization letting the player have a little bit of autonomy, right? Because Bill Belichick would have just not, like, you think Mac Jones is going to stay? Who's drafted? No, absolutely not.
No.
And so that's the big thing is you're giving a rookie some say of who he's throwing the ball to. And that's an up.
I would argue that Mac Jones would have saved both his job and Bill Belichick's job if they let him be a part of the process.
100%.
But the part of that, but to me, that process also needs to be. Hopefully, they limited it down to a handful of players that they liked before they showed them to the quarterback.
Right.
But my fear is how much of the good difference could be that now maybe the scouts were allowed to scout and not have the coach's ride herd over the top of over their process at the end of the season.
It's got to be a balance.
It's got to be a balance, because in the past they would ride herd over the top late in the pre-draft process, and that's not helping anybody.
Oh, you've heard it time and time again. You heard it with Pepper and the Panthers, right? Yeah. It's like apparently the scouts like C.J. Stroud better, but then he's like, no, I want Bryce Young.
Yeah.
He's the owner, so
it happens a lot. It happened in Cleveland, it happened there. And the other thing too is that we have to understand that, I will say I like the idea of Elliott Wolf wanting to enact what the Packers did for Drake May. Mm-hmm. The only difference is that Jordan Love got to sit for 3 years and then inherit young receivers and play.
And this
is everyone's getting dumped into the frying pan at the same time.
And that's the tough thing is, like, it's And the best approach for Drake May would have been a Jordan Love type approach. And that's actually who I compared him to stylistically, because I think both those guys are tremendous arms and can, I think Drake May can be a really good quarterback in the NFL. But I think he needs time to sit. And I don't know if he's going to be afforded that time.
Yeah,
and
I don't think he is either.
That's the tough thing. And and especially you go back to Carolina again, Andy Dalton should start all 17 games.
Yeah.
Bryce Young should not have seen the field. They couldn't block. They had no receivers, no run game.
Yep.
Your best player offensively is literally 33-year-old Adam Thielen and Chuba Hubbard.
They should just put Taven Tepper in. They should have let him be the quarterback. All this problem would have been solved in about 6 minutes. I mean, it would have been solved.
Oh, boy.
I mean, now, hopefully he had an insurance policy for his family. I'm sure he does. He's probably got all his
a nice hefty one too.
Exactly. So,
but
I think it might have been a come to Jesus moment for him. And maybe
such
literally,
a bad organization. They drafted Xavier Legette. I feel bad for Legette, so I don't know
for sure. So who are some of the day 3 prospects we're willing to gamble on? Who's someone?
There's two that really kind of come to mind for me, and the first one is Malik Washington, because I think he goes to a spot that he can start an 11 right away.
Yep,
he's better than Braxton Berrios
and Craycraft. Yeah, he may know
and River Craycraft.
He may have to get up to speed a little bit on reading different types of coverages, but I don't think it's going to take him that long.
100%, because that role is more so a sit-in zone and be the tertiary option if all things break down. But the thing with River Craycraft and Braxton Berrios, what they don't do well, they don't work well after the catch.
No,
and that's the thing is, yes, they're stable pass catchers in terms of their reliability, but Malik Washington can take a pass 50, 60 yards and force missed tackles
and beat a safety 50, 60 yards.
Exactly. And that's the stuff. He can win the ball at his size, which is pretty rare from the guys that McDaniels has been working with in terms of Craycraft, Berrios, etc. And Claypool too, who they thought he was going to be that guy. No. So yeah, exactly. Canadian Football League.
Yep.
But that's the big thing is, Malik Washington can come in, play an 11 within the first 5 weeks of the year, and offer another dimension that the offense hasn't had. That's a big deal, especially moving through Tyreek's older years. They need another post-catch threat.
Yeah.
And that was a big one for me. The other one, Audric Estime. I think he actually goes to a good spot because when you look at Sean Payton year 2, what does Sean Payton do really well in the run game? He deploys 2 backs. He deploys a 2-down banger. And he deploys a pass game weapon, but good zone threat, Alvin Kamara, right? Obviously, Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, and 4 or 5 years ago, awesome. But he wants a 2-down banger. Javonte Williams hasn't been that for him because Javonte Williams can't control the pace of his runs that he likes to call. I think that's a really big one in terms of what I see. The pace that Javonte Williams plays with is a little erratic for what Sean Payton likes to call. And guess who isn't out next year? Javonte Williams. He's gonna be a free agent. Yep. His rookie contract's up. So I think the 2-down role in Denver next year it could be Estime, and that's a super sizable role of Sean Payton's there because he likes to deploy 2 backs. And I think that's a big one for me is looking at what Estime does well, and it's the pacing and tempo of his runs. So that's kind of a perfect marriage in a sense of a day 3 player that could play his way into a significant touch share starting next year potentially.
Well, I'll just mention I'll stay in Denver and say, well, if we're going to play the Audric Estime game, then as much as I liked Lil McLaughlin last year, they picked up a UDFA who he can.
Oh, you're going to steal my UDFA, thanks.
Well, I
I
figured.
love it though.
I know, but I laughed because you took my Malik Washington one
Okay,
too.
there we
So
go. That's
we'll
fair.
go.
1-1.
So 1-1 there. But we'll talk. You know what? We'll save Blake Watson for a little bit later, and we'll just mention. But we'll just mention the one that you gave me because everyone knows we both like this guy, and that's Kamani Vidal. I mean,
Yeah,
Kamani
100%.
Vidal on day 3, that did not change my draft capital of him at
No.
all because they just basically rented J.K. Dobbins last week. I mean, they picked him up last week, which tells you, well, if we don't get a running back we like, at least we have a running back who knows our system. We know if he's healthy enough, we've got one of the best running backs in the league if he can stay healthy. And that's the big if they just picked him up now. But it's kind of more of a let's speculate and see what we have. But Kamani Vidal, we've talked about him. He does everything well enough in terms of and the Charger staff talked about him. That his running back coach is like, look, he's short but not small. He can run through people. He can carry piles. He's just smiling as he's talking about him. He's he really gets up in there as a pass protector. And I thought,
Yep.
other than some certain diagnoses that are a little bit harder for running backs to handle, he handles pass pro well. I mean, pretty well
Very well.
technically. Yeah, if he
Very
just
well.
keeps his head up a little bit more, he'll be. But there's a lot of guys who get away with that in the league. You just keep that up. But I mean, he's everything people thought DeAndre Swift was supposed to be, and so I'm totally looking at him and saying that's a priority pick in a fantasy league.
Oh no, 100%. I mean, I'm seeing it right now. People are drafting like 207, 208, and I'm like, that's a correct valuation because you have a prospect like that, and you and I talk about him at length, but this is someone who graded out as one of the better backs in this class for me.
Yeah.
And it's because he can play on all 3 downs. He's an adequate pass catcher. He's good on gap, good in zone. He can make people miss. He can run with power. He's a good accelerator. He checks a lot of the boxes that you want from a running back in today's NFL, and especially one that has longer careers because he's reliable.
Yeah.
And so you're right about DeAndre Swift. He's a more in control version of Swift. The only question is he going to get a chance? And I think in LA he will because I think he's the best back in that room right now.
Yeah, because Isaiah Spiller still hasn't figured it out.
Nope.
And the other guy isn't healthy in terms of
Then we have Gus Edwards, and it's like Gus Edwards he's all right, he's fine, but like he's there because of Greg Roman.
Yeah,
like he's there because he knows his scheme and he can start on day 1 for you. But in terms of the future of that position for that organization, I wouldn't be surprised if next year Kamani Vidal gets the majority of the carries.
Yeah, I have Kamani Vidal 17th on my board for a post draft, and I've tracked 9 leagues thus far, and the high pick for him is let's see, where is it? The high pick for him is 27th, and the low pick for him is 41st. So he's literally averaging basically the 34th pick, closer to the 35th pick.
Mid-third round.
Late third in a 12-team league.
Yeah, a 12-team league.
Yeah,
right.
late third.
Yeah.
So I basically have him 17 spot underrated by 17 spots. That's like
it's huge.
Yeah, that's huge. He's one of the most underrated players in the draft class. So he's one. And then I guess if we're gonna go, with somebody else, that would be day 3. On my board. I'll say, when did Kate Stover get picked? Was it 3rd round or 4th round? I don't remember.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Let me look.
Okay.
I don't know what a pick he was exactly, but I think it was.
I
think it was the top. I think it was like 100 something.
Yeah.
He was day 3 pick. Is a fourth rounder.
Okay.
4th rounder.
So I'll say he's pretty underrated too, because again,
okay.
Speaking of C.J. Stroud picking one of his guys, speaking of the fact that by the end of 2025, the only person in the receiving game under contract will be Tank Dell.
Yeah, that's it.
So, and when you look at Stover, listen, Dalton Schultz is a good tight end in terms of serviceable in the receiving game, but he's not a field stretcher. He's not unbelievable after the catch. He gets banged up a lot. He's a good blocker. Stover's not as good of a blocker. He's better after the catch. He has more speed to stretch the vertical seam, and I would argue he's a better pass receiver. Just
Yeah, no, I think he's more versatile. I think as a pass catcher, I think that's the biggest thing with Stover is, when you look at Dalton Schultz, what he does well, he's just kind of a safety blanket.
Yeah,
and he reminds me of like late career Zach Ertz.
Yeah,
which is fine.
Yeah,
but it's not gonna, it's not like blow your socks off.
Well,
neither is Cade Stover, but I think he's more of he's a better athlete, more versatile than a guy like Schultz is. And you're right. They don't really have any pass catchers under contract. Obviously, we can probably project that Nico Collins is there. Stephon Diggs is likely one and done.
Yeah.
You're not going to pay him another.
If Xavier Hutchinson can grow, maybe something will happen there. But most likely they'll be drafting somebody else.
Right. And then at tight end, Dalton Schultz is probably going to be on the way out. So I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. So I'm there. I would say from a standpoint of, a guy who can give you Hunter Henry plus. That's really how I saw him.
I like it. Yeah.
He can be the Hunter Henry plus version of that from that standpoint. So, okay, how about guys, from this standpoint as I click around on our this. So how about guys that we think UDFAs who intrigue us? You get, I mentioned Blake Watson and kind of spilled the tea on that one. So
that was my big one. Because just like we talked about with Estime and on the flip side of that, you need a back in Sean Payton's system that can run angle and option routes and beat the backer. Okay, that's a big one. And with drafting Bo Nix, he wants a quarterback that is a big part of his game and being accurate to allow the running back to run after the catch in that scenario. And in all scenarios, short to intermediate. That was a really strong point of Drew Brees and did it better than anyone in the league, was he gave his guys a window post catch.
Yep.
And that was really a big deal. That's what Bo Nix does really well. Better than probably almost anybody in this class. And I think that is why Sean Payton targeted him. But talk about Blake Watson. He's the only back in that room right now who can do that. Jill McLaughlin doesn't have the kind of timing and pace. I think he's a good open field player. He's fun. Kind of like a Tariq Cohen-esque type guy. But Blake Watson is closer to what Sean Payton wants.
Yeah.
Yep. Sean Payton wants in a receiving skill set for the running back. Javonte Williams doesn't have that. Audric Esme doesn't have that. Jalen McLaughlin isn't that type of player. But Blake Watson can provide that from day one if you need him to. Yeah. So I think he's one of mine. The other one is Jalen Coker. I think he makes the team. The Carolina Panthers receiving room is lacking a ton of depth. Right? I mean, who do you have? You have Leggett, Johnson, Thielen, and then a bunch of dudes. Like, you don't have another strong fourth option on that depth chart besides Mingo, who I think is falling down the depth chart, right, with Canellis now coming in. But, if Coker ends up being the fifth receiver on that depth chart and climbs up, next year you might be looking at Leggett, Johnson, and then who's the third receiver there, right? If Coker shows something, there's a path for him to see relevance in terms of snaps. So he's mine. I like his skill set. Guy's a ball winner. They haven't had one of those. I think Leggett can be that if they allow him to develop a little bit. But I think he offers you an intriguing skill set and wide receiver 5 or so on the depth chart.
Sure. Listen, I'm going to reverse field for a moment here because it's the host privileges. And go back to day 3 guys who have an opportunity.
Go for it.
Because we've got to say Dylan Lobby. There's no way. Because
obligatory.
Because the Raiders. Because first of all, the Raiders didn't find their quarterback. They were going to trade up, but Atlanta decided to pick their quarterback, and they're actually when they were bluffing about the Aiden O'Connell plan, they're actually going to do the Aiden O'Connell plan. Actually, it's Gardner Minshew, but O'Connell will get a chance to compete. But Minshew's, a smart enough quarterback, I would say for sure, and there's going to be a lot of times where they're going to have to check down, and I think that Dylan Lobby. There's nobody. I mean, Amir Abdullah was a fine college prospect, but has proven pretty much that he's going to be labeled what he is. And Lobby has a really good chance to come in there and be the complement to Zamir White.
Oh, 100%.
White, we know what White is and what White
we
isn't.
Do. Yes, and I think the over-under on balls White catches is probably 5.
Yes, exactly.
The whole season. So, yeah, and I think you're right. Amir Abdullah is the special teams piece. Third down back on a bad team.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think Lobby has a chance of relevance, and he's a big one for me. Throughout the process of just kind of seeing, hey, this guy might get significant snaps somewhere because he has a unique skill set. He's a guy that can stick around in the league for a while.
Yeah.
So he's an interesting piece. Question though, who starts, Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew?
Minshew.
I don't know. I think, dude,
they're not going to do it though. You're right.
I think O'Connell gets a shot.
Yeah.
I do. I just think because they need to kind of see what they have, or just quick hook and say, nah, Minshew's going to start this year. Then we're going to, who's probably I think the betting favorite to start next year for them? Shadur Sanders.
There you go.
I think 100%. I think if I was a team to draft Shadur Sanders, it would 1,000% be the Raiders. 1,000%.
I could see that. I'll just say this. Aiden O'Connell's agent did a fantastic job of bugging everyone about how good Aiden O'Connell was. That dude probably deserves a raise because he was the most active agent out there from what I was hearing. I'll just put it that way. But yeah, you're right. They probably do need to give him an opportunity, and they know what they have in Gardner. And if they didn't think if they felt like he was promising, that's fine. So I get it. But I'll say my UDFA. I mean, listen, Dylan Johnson getting. You know it's gonna happen. I'm just gonna. But I mean,
I love it. I
mean, they got the same. They've got two of the same back in Pollard and Spears. Okay, pretty similar at least. They're not the same, but they're similar in what the role would be. Okay, then you look at Hassan Haskins, who has just no juice. You've got Julius Chestnut, who just doesn't have quite the experience level and the ability to process at the level you want to see.
Yeah,
and Dylan Johnson is a good pass protector. So I can see this being a Dylan Johnson, Tyjae Spears backfield for the next 3 to 4 years if Pollard doesn't work out. And in 2 to 3 years, Johnson could have that opportunity. It's a low odds bet, but it's one that I like where he landed in terms of the opportunity to establish himself as a dimension that's a little different than what they have.
100%. And I think the one thing looking at their running back room, Tony Pollard is not a low red zone guy.
No.
Tyjae Spears, don't know if I don't know if not Vrabel, but I don't know if that staff.
Do you really want him to be that guy? Yeah.
Yeah, like Vrabel last year, even when Tyjae Spears played more when Henry was banged up a little bit, wasn't that guy. I don't think you don't want that to be his primary role. They don't have a low red zone back. And Dylan Johnson profiles the best as someone who can kind of go after it and really make do in the low red zone. So I think that's an interesting one because that might be a role, we saw Jamal Williams.
Yeah.
And the role he played with the Lions. And it was, okay, go bang it in.
Yeah.
And
and absolutely Dylan Johnson can be that.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big deal. They have to get to the red zone first in terms of.
Yes, they do.
we gotta see what Will Levis can do because first start. Oh yeah, were in the money. Then after that, it was
Oh, yeah, remember Marcus Mariota, that guy after Steve
oh
McNair,
yeah,
that
oh
that
yeah,
quarterback that they last had, who was a franchise caliber, Pro Bowl MVP caliber quarterback. How many years has it been since Steve McNair was the
been a
starter for the
long
Tennessee
time.
Titans? Yeah, and guess what? They let all those players they drafted start early. So Atlanta fans, calm the fuck down, because because seriously, you don't you're going to only have to wait 2 years with Kirk Cousins' contract to find out if Michael Penix is any good. And you got the second best quarterback, in my opinion, and you're going to let him sit the right way probably for the first couple of years if it
Yeah,
works out.
no, 100%. I think kind of on the point of the Falcons at 8 going Michael Penix. Um, I don't mind it because I like Michael Penix. I think he's a good player. I think it's foolish if you have a 36-year-old Kirk Cousins and you have holes on your roster. They need to fill to contend with 36-year-old Kirk Cousins. That's the issue.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you have, they could have drafted Fashanu, right? They could have bolstered their receiver core and drafted a Doomsday, right? You could have gone 2 tight ends and drafted Brock Bowers. They drafted Michael Penix. But what I don't like is Terry Fontenot saying 4 years until we might see. No, it's not going to be 4 years, Terry Fontenot. Yeah. It is probably going to be. It is probably going to be 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think the tough thing is too, like the not letting Kirk Cousins know until afterwards. That's kind of tough if you think about it.
See,
I don't know.
I totally disagree with this. Okay,
I don't know.
Totally
I just don't.
See,
I just don't like that. I think it's just strange.
Here's my thing. Okay, Kirk Cousins. First of all, we all know that before he had his image redeemed by the Netflix special, was a little bit of a strange duck. Okay,
I think the Netflix special shows it's a strange duck,
right? Okay, he was part of a draft that undermined Robert Griffin.
Robert Griffin III. Okay, correct.
We didn't know whether he was any good until his third year when he was 27. Michael Penix would be 28 in 4 years if they wait that long, and they're not. Okay. Second of all, we saw Atlanta last year. All right. Great running game. Good offensive line. Bought their quarterback enough time. You've got a Pro Bowl caliber tight end in ability. You've got a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver in ability. And you've got a running back who can catch out of the backfield like a Pro Bowl caliber player. And you have components on the defense that are promising. Now, I'm not saying that if you just added a quarterback that you would be in the NFC Championship. But I would say that if you just added a quarterback, you would be a playoff team in that division that you were in last year. But what did they have? They had a quarterback that was so bad in Desmond Ridder that Arthur Smith had to use an offense that basically had to fall on his own sword and grumble about it because he couldn't handle the questioning he got. But he had to basically simplify the offense that limited all those players because his quarterbacks couldn't do the job. So I hear Kirk Cousins, first of all, saying, I would have liked us to have X, Y, and Z. But if I'm Atlanta, what's going to help my team get into the playoffs faster? A defensive player, and then we lose our 36-year-old quarterback due to some compensatory injury because he's still rehabbing the Achilles, and we don't have a quarterback worth a damn. But we put a quarterback in there who might be able to help them stay competitive, even if as a rookie, to be able to do that. I would argue that maybe, I know everyone feels differently, but maybe having the second quarterback actually is helping the team more than having one more piece on your defense where you're still a year or two away there. Whereas at least, especially when you think of it this way, Brandon, next year, I don't care about how many quarterbacks we project are good or not, even though the projection seems to be low, but we never really
Yeah,
know,
for
right?
sure.
We never really know. But the demand for a quarterback next year there's like 12 teams that are going to need a quarterback next year, I believe. So if you're the Falcons and you looked at that and said, "Holy cow, there's going to be 12 teams that need a quarterback next year,"
Sure.
and it's better to have a quarterback and get a new. It's better to get a quarterback when you already have one. If you're looking at that scenario and you see it from that perspective, that's why I like the deal. Because
Yeah.
and I'm not telling Kurt because maybe we know because Kurt just opened his mouth and said to the media, "I don't like the pick. I'm disappointed. There's all this going on." Oh, and then by the way, in the same breath, he said, "And I can only run fast in a straight line. I can't break a pocket right now. Though I expect that to happen by camp. It's right now I can't break a pocket if I had
For
to."
sure.
Okay, you just said so much right there. Maybe they already know that maybe they
Hey, my feet's totally
just,
screwed.
just shut up and play.
But okay, so here's my thing with the Atlanta Falcons pick. I agree with the shut up and play. What is it? There's probably two scenarios I think that might have been better than the FedEx pick. Scenario one, you draft an offensive lineman.
Sure.
Okay, I think Olaf Fashoni was available at that pick. Okay. To help protect your gimpy quarterback. And then you sign a Jimmy Garoppolo to back him up. Okay? Or scenario two, which I thought they should have done at that time. You do the Russell Wilson, Justin Fields thing, but you do Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields. And then still draft an offensive line.
Well, I was all in on the Justin Fields one before, as that was
I thought that was
the way I thought they would do it too.
Absolute swing and a miss.
Sure.
They didn't go that route for that little of capital. I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I do think Michael Penix is going to be successful there.
Yep.
And I think it's going to happen sooner than we think.
Yep.
Because I don't think, from a biomechanics standpoint, a 36-year-old quarterback having an Achilles rupture on his plant foot is going to end well.
No.
It will not. So if you're drafting Michael Penix and you're listening to this, draft him earlier than you think.
Yep.
Because this is going to be a shorter window than we think. I don't like the pick per se, because if I'm a GM, I'm going a different direction. However, with the issues that Kirk Cousins has, it's not like Aaron Rodgers where it's not on his plan. Different. It's if it's not in the push foot, it's not as big of a deal from a down to down force reabsorption standpoint. That's the huge thing.
Yeah. And
so Kirk Cousins is going to totally struggle with that, I think, early. And Bijan Robinson's going to get a bajillion touches because they're going to be running it early on, I think.
I'll just say this. I have Michael Penix 12th on my board, and he's going off in drafts. He is the most underrated pick in fantasy drafts, period, right now, based on if you value Michael Penix as he's going to be a good player. Right now, let's see if I can even find where the hell he is. There he is. Okay, I have him 12th. The average draft position is 31st. So, you literally are 23. You're looking at him as 19 picks, is underrated by 19 picks. Nearly full 2 rounds. So absolutely, that's the guy to go with. And listen, I don't know who wanted Michael Penix, because you look at Fontenot explaining what this tells me too is, did Arthur Blank want Kirk Cousins? I think he did. And I think he demanded Kirk Cousins and got Kirk Cousins, and the rest of the team was like, we got to get a quarterback.
the draft room video of him explaining to Arthur Blank was incredible.
Yeah, yep. And Arthur Blank might actually wind up being thankful that they got him, Because I mean, I understand where you're coming from with like getting a guy, but Jimmy Garoppolo ain't that answer either. But like
No,
Justin,
he's not.
you know, but
Justin Fields would have been. I think Jimmy Garoppolo was an okay stopgap and a good offense.
yeah,
Justin Fields would have been an
yeah,
elevator for them, but
yes.
didn't happen. Now he's in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
So
that's true. But I think Michael Penix in that offense will be fine. I think he'll be fine. If not
100%.
fine, he'll be good. So yeah, that's my underrated player. That's for sure.
I love it.
We'll look
That's
at it
very
from
good.
that standpoint. So, how about, overrated? Who's an overrated player based on fit?
Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay.
I think that's a bigger one for me, just because you kind of look at LSU. Okay, he was a secondary option to Malik Neighbors, and he did well, and he did well in that role. He was good, solid, good mover, good length, but has a skill set similar to Quentin Johnston, and that's a skill set that needs the ball early in routes. Right? And needs to be scheme touches better in the slot than he is in the outside. That's my big hang up is he needs route concepts similar to what we saw with early career Juju Smith-Schuster right in Pittsburgh, where you're getting him going over the middle of the field. Everything's kind of short, but you're letting him use his God-given talents after the catch. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is one of the most underrated after the catch athletes in this whole cycle. Just his combination of reacceleration, length, and stop-start ability is really, really good. However, you go to a system in Jacksonville that has a lot of target competition, not just Christian Kirk, but we're talking about Evan Ingram, who caught over 100 balls last year. Then we're also talking about Gabe Davis at X. Kirk's playing the slot, and then Thomas Jr. is probably going to play on the other side of Gabe Davis's. So you're relegating a guy like Thomas Jr. to essentially an outside role. Wasn't a lot of motion in Jacksonville's offense last year when you watched him play. And if he had Christian Kirk's role, I'd say, oh, that's good. Like he can play the power slot role and do it fairly well. But if you're asking him to play outside more, he might struggle a bit because there's not a guy like Malik Neighbors to take away coverage in Jacksonville. And that's kind of the issue is Brian Thomas isn't that guy yet, in my opinion.
Right.
And that's the tough part is, it's you have target competition and you're kind of miscast, kind of like Kellen Moore miscast Quentin Johnston last year. Quentin Johnston was not an outside receiver. No. When you look at his college tape, his best games from a per route basis were in the slot. I did a whole video segment last year of why Quentin Johnston is miscast if he plays outside. He is a really good slot winner when given a two-way go. Free releases, he kind of feasts on those. Good across the middle of the field in terms of crossing patterns and delays. That's what Quentin Johnston did really well. Did none of that his rookie year. Absolutely 0% of that in Kellen Moore's offense in LA. And so that's my fear with Brian Thomas Jr. is they're going to kind of just put him outside and say, okay, you win or you don't, we're going to get the ball no matter what. We're going to go to Ingram over the middle of the field. We'll go to Kirk in the middle of the field, or we'll throw it up to Gabe Davis. And so that's kind of my big one in terms of overrated spot. I'd say the other one's Ricky Pearsall.
I would agree short term for sure.
Yeah, short term 100%, because I think his best role is the Debo role in that offense, not as much Debo out of the backfield, but just kind of on those same concepts. But he can offer a little more on the boundary. He can offer a lot more on outbreakers. But he's not going to see that role with Debo there and or Ayuk, either one. I think he can play both those roles fairly well. I think he could be an X in the league, not a super high-end one, but someone who's serviceable and won't be replaced easily. But I don't know if he sees that. And that's a huge – think of the target competition in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Ayuk, you have Samuel, you have Kittle, you have McCaffrey.
And
so
you play a lot of two tight end or tight end fullback and not a lot of three receiver.
Not a lot of 11, and you play ahead a lot.
Yep.
That's the tough thing when you're talking about a team like San Francisco. They play ahead, they play the lead. And Pearsall's not going to be. I think he's going to be productive from a real football standpoint, but I think he's going to be frustrating from a fantasy standpoint, 100%.
Well, one of mine is I don't know what happened in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago. They were always known as like the receiver capital for picking players who were like underrated and developing them. Though we know that I don't think development was really the way we hear it,
Sure.
but they seem to have an eye for getting guys. And certainly Deontay Johnson was one of those guys. Emmanuel
Right.
Sanders, Antonio
Yeah.
Brown. But I look at Roman Wilson and I wonder if somebody got a promotion and is not part of that wide receiver crew anymore, or left for another team, or something's going on with their family. Hopefully not. But like I look at Roman Wilson and I see the athlete, but I don't see the technician, like not
Right.
remotely. And so I look at him and I go, Calvin Austin isn't Roman Wilson's size, but he's a much better technician. He just wasn't
Right.
healthy, and that's why they're looking for somebody else. But I think they're going to be looking elsewhere next year.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right, because who's the number 2 in Pittsburgh really? Like,
No, yeah,
it's Pat Fryermuth,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so, yeah, I mean, if you want to win, especially with Justin Fields potentially being the starting quarterback, let's say he starts next year. George Pickens, your guy. Pat Fryermuth plays a big role because you know what Justin Fields did well in Chicago? Went to Cole Kmet.
yep,
Pat Fryermuth's probably a little more talented than Kmet is, but also, too, it's like you need another secondary receiver who can win on the outside. And I don't think that's Roman Wilson. And so I think you're 100% right in that. So, yeah, they probably go a different direction. And it's kind of telling they were in on Ayuk, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a huge one if
Yep.
you think about it.
yep,
They want to add another high-end piece. And unless Roman Wilson shows us something that we haven't seen, which could be possible because he didn't see a lot of production at Michigan, then they're going to be looking elsewhere in 2026.
he makes effort as a blocker, which makes him a Steelers receiver. But
Oh, 100%.
but the rest of it is very important. And then I'm gonna start a debate probably on this one.
Oh, boy.
So it'll be fun. We'll have a good laugh when we do it because I'm staying Malachi Corley.
Oh, my God. I knew it. Oh, my God.
I fear. I look at this team and look. It's Aaron for one more year. You look at the team. Oh, and the receiver they might have is Denzel Mims in Pittsburgh, but who knows really ever. I mean, like, I think Mims is kind of the intriguing one of that group. But anyway, Malachi Corley. Alan Lazard's still on that team. They schemed him open an awful lot as a big slot receiver. I look at Corley, and I know that we'll get a good conversation from you about what he does as a man-to-man route runner. I didn't see enough that I felt good about it. I felt good about what he can do in the middle of the field, or at least the promise of what he could develop into. But my fear is, regardless of whether you see it or not, in terms of like the technical ability to be the man on an outside level or even on an inside level, what I fear is I see the Jets taking one look at him and seeing Elijah, and we see the what was it? Yeah,
Elijah Moore.
Elijah
Yeah, right.
Moore, and go, let's just gadget this guy. Let's just make him a gadget. We're going to get the ball to him in space a lot. And that may be better with Aaron Rodgers because he may be more timely about figuring out when to really be efficient with how calling plays into that and making adjustments pre-snap into things like that. But I also worry that, like often gadgets do, they get lost in the couch cushions and you never find them again. And I'm kind of worried about Corley on a Jets team that it's going to be Aaron one and done probably, and then where are we? Maybe we get 2 out of Aaron, and that could help. But I just worry Aaron's like, I'm not going to have the time. He might be looking at this as like, I want the players I'm experienced with. We got to win now. And if this kid can show me, can help me, that's fine. But Aaron's all about adjustments, pre-snap, post-snap, and he's going to talk up Corley pre-camp if Corley plays well, and then in mid-August, when now everyone's they're trying to get the game plan down, and Aaron's starting to ramp up all the mental, conceptual parts of the game. He's going to be going to the New York media like he did with Romeo Dubs and all the other players that were in Green Bay that were young.
The Christian Watson.
And we can't. He's none of these young players are going to be ready to play if they can't get down these adjustments, and that was where we saw it disappear. And I'm worried about that with Corley.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid concern. So this can go one or two ways, I feel like. So Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh were like, all right, day 2 priority is Malachi Corley. The draft room thing about it was 20 minutes long, and I was crying laughing. It was hilarious. They wanted Malachi Corley, and I think they wanted a Randall Cobb piece for Aaron. The issue is he's not Randall Cobb because he's not. He needs to grow into being a true man-to-man winner in the slot. Okay. And that's the thing is he didn't do it at Western Kentucky. So he wasn't tasked with that. That wasn't given to him at Western Kentucky. It was, we're going to give you the ball right away because you're better than everybody else on the other side. So that's how we're going to play things.
Run,
it worked,
son,
right?
Run. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And it worked.
Yeah.
Right? He just ran over defensive backs and linebackers who are now accountants, which is fine. But you're right. What's going to happen next year if, let's say, Aaron's not there, Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas might be gone. We just talked about a new regime earlier, what that does to players and their valuation. Malachi Corley needs to be treated like a centerpiece of an offensive system in order to be super successful. You look at guys who have worked. Deebo Samuel. Okay. Deebo Samuel's most successful years in San Francisco, where he was the centerpiece of that offensive system, right? That's how it works with guys like Malachi Corley and their skill set. Is if they're not the centerpiece, what do they do at a high level to stress a defense? They don't, and that's the issue. Laviska Shenault Jr. ran into the same thing when we talk about durability as well. Laviska's rookie year was great because he was a ball carrier. He was schemed open. He was able to work on delays and work in the screen game, and it was a great extension of what they want to do offensively. Then Urban Meyer comes, and then his career trajectory completely shifts and changes.
Yeah,
because he tried to make him an outside. He might try to make an X receiver for whatever reason, but if a new regime comes, they might have a totally different idea of how to utilize Corley and not worry about developing him, but worry about bringing in players that can play their brand of football.
Right. And
so that's the tough thing is you don't know where that's going to go. I like Corley a ton because I think if he works, I think he's going to be underrated because of what they want to potentially do with him. And I think they want to make Aaron's life easier. They don't want to work downfield as much. They have Breece Hall, obviously, and he's another year removed from the ACL. So I think they're going to play a little more ball control offense. But also they want to stress teams out in December. And if they get to December, Corley is the piece that can help them from a physicality standpoint that they missed. They don't have a hammer in that offense. Yeah. And I think that's what they want from Corley, but they might not be longer, around here long to see it. So
that's for sure. So let's end this with the underrated guys. Who are a couple underrated guys for you?
I think my first one's Bo Nix.
See, there you go.
And I think it's because if you look at, we alluded to this before, the brand of football Sean Payton plays. Everything is first, second level. Everything is timing-based route concepts. What does Bo Nix do better than maybe anyone in this class? It's work the first and second level of the field with accuracy, with timing, with precision. That's what he does at a very high level. And that is who Sean Payton needs. Russell Wilson did not work because Russell Wilson has to play Russell Wilson football in order to get the most out of Russell Wilson. It's not how Sean Payton
Russell
plays.
Wilson is Banksy.
Yeah, 100%. Beat of his own drum,
Yep.
right? And you can have success with that. And Pete Carroll let him do his thing.
Yep.
But Sean Payton, no, this is the offensive system. This is how I want you to execute it. And there's freedom to work within it if you can find it. Like Drew Brees, right? If you look at what Drew Brees did at an exceptional level, it was diagnosing and recognizing like over the middle coverages, right? When the safety is coming down, especially with Michael Thomas, right? There's a really big one for him. And then working the running backs in the receiving game.
Yep.
And being really precise on angle and option patterns. That was a super big deal of what he wants to do. So Bo Nix is a hand in glove fit with Sean Payton. Yep. That's my absolute first one.
He knows who he is too, and knows what he isn't.
Knows limitations.
He's the only quarterback in this class, I would argue, who consistently didn't play hero ball. Right. And when he did, it was so logical that it made sense that he would throw across his body. It would make sense when he took chances. That he rarely made those types of big mistakes that way. And he's a better athlete than people give him credit for.
At Auburn, that's what he was known for.
Yeah.
His early career, he was known for his athleticism.
And his receivers dropped a lot of balls there.
Yep. And he reined in a lot of so he used to have a lot of hero tendencies, as you probably know.
Yeah.
He's reined it in a ton.
Yes.
He's become, from a fundamental, like, play the position standpoint, has grown leaps and bounds.
He's what Mitchell Trubisky should have been.
Yes.
Like he's mature Mitchell Trubisky that we 100%. Never saw.
100%. He is a in control version of Mitch. 100% agree with that. But yeah, I think he's a big one for me. 100%. I think he's someone too that's being undervalued right now in rookie, especially if you play 6 point per passing touchdown. He's massive because he's not a guy that's going to make a ton of mistakes. So he's huge. From that regard, I think he's going to work in Sean Payton's system well. I think now they have to get him some actual weapons on the outside. I think Cortland Sutton's okay. I think Troy Franklin's a good he's a good level 3 beater, but I think that's really all he is. That's why he fell to the 4th round.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that offensive system and how Sean Payton kind of work it. But he's my big first one. Last one's Jalen Polk, man. I absolutely love that pick. I had him graded higher than Jalen McMillan, his own teammate. I had him right there with Ricky Pearsall and Xavier Legette in terms of grade, just because I think he's the security blanket of this class, I think, in terms of what he offers in offense. It's kind of like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I've said this before. I said it in the journal I have, in the audio journal when I talk about my grades and my film grades. And I'm like, you know what? This kid could be the Amon-Ra of this class. I said it about a month ago. Because I think he offers a safety, security, and he offers you a physicality in the run game. As a blocker, to really help and elevate an NFL offense. And I think he can offer you more versatility than he might lead on, especially in the red zone. I think he's really a high leverage type prospect where he works really well in high leverage situations. I think he's, like I say, a safety blanket. But he's someone I think is going to be it was a long career, like a Tyler Boyd. Just a reliable player. I think it's a good marriage between him and a Javon Baker who has a lot of upside. But I think he's going to be someone that makes Drake May's life easier, competitive dude after the catch as well. But I love that spot and having day 2 capital and having the first offensive player, sans Drake May, of Gerard Mayo's tenure to be Jalen Polk kind of speaks volumes.
Nice. Listen, I mean, I like how he is as a ball winner. He's very good at being able to win in a manner that is mature in terms of positioning himself. He's good after the catch. So I think that there's going to be some definite value for him. And I think there's going to be a natural affinity between him and Drake May for sure, along with Baker. For me, Jermaine Burton, like easily. Jermaine Burton to me, like, listen, you can make an argument right now that Jermaine Burton is better for the Bengals than T. Higgins, and and
100%.
because T. Higgins may be better at the catch point in terms of positioning along the boundary and winning the ball, but if Jamar Chase got hurt, T. Higgins can't run the expanse of the route tree that Chase can. Jermaine
No,
Burton can. Jermaine Burton can run that route tree. He can play all three positions if you needed him to play all three positions, I believe. He's not as good as Higgins at what Higgins does best, but if Jamar Chase got hurt, he could be the number one guy and be competent at that. But early on, if Higgins stays and with Boyd gone, I think he's good enough to probably be able to learn quickly and be used in that capacity if you needed him to use him there. If T. Higgins gets traded, he's automatically going to probably
100%.
I would put him as the flanker and let Jamar Chase be the split end. And then you have Burton at flanker, and that's his natural position. And I think now you're set. But you can switch those guys, and you can switch them around as need be. He is a competitive ball player who plays physically, who runs good routes. He gets yards after the catch. He can win contested plays if need be on a lot of routes. He's just a polished player for his age at this point. And I look at him and I'm like, listen, he's a top 12 player on my board. And I think he's going to be a steal.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I think he's a better offensive fit for what Zach Taylor wants to do than T. Higgins is.
Yeah.
I think what they miss is a non-Jamar Chase level 3 winner in terms of getting vertical quickly and stressing the defense. The defense isn't stressed as much by T. Higgins because he if he wins the ball, he wins the ball. If he outpositions a DB, he outpositions a DB. That's what he does. That's it. That's his calling
bigger,
card.
slower DeAndre Hopkins.
Sure, absolutely. Every day of the week. And I think, too, the versatility that Jermaine Burton has is being an inside-out winner. You can mismatch in terms of concepts him and Jamar Chase and not miss a beat. And that's scary. They haven't had that with Higgins, right? Higgins has the routes that he runs really well, and that's what you know is coming. He can just beat you when the ball's in the air, right? But when the boots are on the ground, Jermaine Burton can really hurt defenses. And if he gets by you, he can put 6 on the board. He's a good after the catch player as well, like you said. Very competitive. Very competitive player.
He's Robert Woods like, or maybe even Emmanuel Sanders like. And
Sure.
imagine prime Emmanuel Sanders with his prime seasons in Denver. Imagine him opposite Jamar Chase.
100%.
That's scary. You could
100%.
see briefly what that was like with him and Stephon Diggs when he was just healthy enough for moments. You could see that. He's a Will Fuller compliment sans the injuries,
Sure.
hopefully. So
yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think he can definitely be a really strong piece in that offense. I think he can honestly be a bigger T.Y. Hilton type player.
Yes, love
And
that.
I think he's competitive, good after the catch. He just offers you more versatility. That be honest with you, the offense needs that versatility.
Yeah.
You don't have that guy. I like Charlie Jones a lot in last year's class. I thought he could slot in and be Tyler Boyd plus in a way, but injury happened. I don't think he's not going to get the opportunity anymore. But with Tyler Boyd potentially being on the outs, right? I think Jermaine Burton slots in, and he's gonna really create some interesting mismatches across the board.
Listen, we could do this all night, but we know we got a couple weeks from now we can talk about this some more.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk about some more players that are kind of hot button issues for people. I'm sure we can get to Keon Coleman and Adonai Mitchell.
Oh, for sure.
We can talk about some of them and Ray Davis and Ben Sano. I'd like to hear that take as well. Some thoughts on some of those guys. So we'll get to that. But again, you can find Brandon at Angelo Analysis, Angelo_fantasy up next at Matt Waldman. You can find me there or mattwaldman.com. And, thanks a lot for listening, folks. We have a good time with this.
We do.
And we had a good laugh about Kirk Cousins and the whole Penix
Oh,
situation.
yeah.
Everyone's going to argue with me about the Penix situation because I think I'm
It's
on my
funny.
own island with it.
You. I don't know if you're on your own island, but I mean, you love Penix.
I do love Penix.
I know. I don't disagree with you.
And I do, and I see the logic of why they did what they did, but I do understand they could have got another player,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I think I can make a compelling argument to at least say it wasn't stupid as fuck. It was just maybe like questionable,
Questionably stupid.
That's me. All right, thanks, folks. Have a good one.